Thank you very much. Perfect. So my name is Milana. I'm Policy Officer at the European Patients Forum. And let me just take the clicker actually. So a few words of who we are, because indeed you might not all of you be familiar with this organization. We are an independent, non-profit umbrella organization of patient organizations across Europe and across disease areas. And we have 81 members at the moment who are either big European disease-specific associations. We already mentioned rare disease, so we can also mention Eurordis, which is our member, or Mental Health Europe, Alzheimer Europe, so very big disease-specific organizations. But we also have national coalitions of patients, indeed also the French one. So as we are here, let's mention them. And I don't know if we connect some million patient organizations, but we do, it's an estimate that we reach to 150 million patients across Europe, so individual patients. But still quite a big number of organizations that we indeed work with. And very briefly, what we do, as you can see, we work on 4 streams. So we have policy and advocacy, where we try to provide a patient perspective in EU health policies, including the European health data space. We work on capacity building, so we try to basically install the knowledge that we gained to our members, both national and European ones, but we also very often invite experts to do that, as Petra, as our Deepak, who help us in this capacity building. We also work a lot on European projects, where we try to bring the patient perspective, and most of the time what we try to do is to disseminate this into the patient community. And of course, communications is really a stream that connects all of the others. And just very briefly on the work that we do on digital and why we do it. So it's actually one of our strategic goals, goal number 3, which is the digital transformation that delivers for patients. What we try to do is to engage in all of the policies, projects, capacity building, in order to support safe, high quality, more participatory and more patient-centered healthcare. And we try to do this by trying to push for co-design and patient preferences to be at the heart of digital health solutions and digital policies. And just a few examples of what we do when it comes to digital health specifically. We have an EU capacity building program for our members. It's quite high level, but still it's very important for them to understand what is the artificial intelligence about, what could be the benefits, what could be the risks, but also how they can be involved. So we don't really go into very specific technical issues, but this is also not something that we are indeed required to know. Then one of the biggest policy files that we work on at the moment is European health data space. Then in projects, many of the digital health projects we are part of, and then the last one, I'll talk a bit more about it later, but it's our Data Saves Lives initiative, which is, well, 5 years this year, so in a month we actually have our anniversary. And this initiative is really trying to raise awareness among the patient community about responsible data sharing. And on data sharing, I wanted to include these slides on patient views on digital health and data. It's very, very difficult to have a very unified position of the patient community. This is not possible, first of all, because patients come from different communities, from different diseases. There are some patients that might be a bit more prone to data sharing. For example, rare disease patients, around 97% of them would be very happy to share the data. But then we also have some other communities, and you can think about sexual or reproductive health or mental health, where this data maybe is a bit more sensitive for the patients. And also we come from different countries, and this trust in data sharing, we have seen that is very, very linked to the trust in the government of the country you come from. So a unified position is not really possible, but what we try to do is to collect through surveys and studies and simply the interactions that we have with the patient communities and organizations. And what we have understood so far is that patients are very, very much willing to play a more active role in managing their own condition. However, this is very difficult if they don't have access to their health records. And generally, the majority of the patients see benefits in having these data, so the health records, in the electronic format. They would also be very willing to use e-health in the short, medium future, for example, if there are savings for them or if they can better manage their condition. And lastly, they're generally comfortable and willing to share the data, especially if it's of vital importance to advance health research, help other patients, and ultimately benefit society. And then, so we've seen the perspective on data sharing, but so more specifically on the European health data space. What we have found so far is that patients and citizens can indeed access various online services. You can just think about your banking apps, for example, or banking data, but the accessibility and portability of health data really significantly lags behind in the EU. And, well, also outside the EU, but we're talking about the EHDS. And this issue really undermines patient autonomy and the fundamental right to health because they cannot indeed access their data. It poses challenges also in the secondary use, so for researchers, regulators, and innovators, which, however, in the end, it's still negatively impacting the patients. And in general, we know that EHDS is not perfect, but it is crucial development for us and for the healthcare systems because we've seen what was the situation now and we imagine how it could be if it's implemented in a way that is also, however, aligned with the views of the patients. And then maybe just a few things that actually really very much connects to what Petra was saying. It's about the main gains that we see for the patients. So the first one is about access. And this is probably the major benefit that we see there. And this is the ability of patients to finally access their health, their personal health data at no cost, regardless of their location. It's the data portability. So it would allow them to share the data with healthcare professionals, both nationally and across other EU countries. So there is also the issue of continuity of care. And then we have a few points for control. So patients will be allowed to add information to their records. They will be allowed to request changes in case of incorrect or incomplete data, which is very important because some recent studies say that around between 20 and 40% of patients actually find errors in their records. Third is the possibility to restrict access to specific data or specific healthcare professionals. Allow patients to find out who accessed their data, of course, always in the primary use. And all of this, we hope, would lead to more patient autonomy and improved quality of care, but also better decision-making of patients in their own health journey. When it comes to the secondary use, it's a bit maybe more overall benefits rather than specifically for patients, but of course we have better research and innovation, but if we want to translate it to the patients, for us, it would be the focus on unmet medical needs or better and cheaper access to medicines and medical devices and faster development of these medicines and devices. Personalized medicines, of course, but also improved access, improved public health measures such as faster and more coordinated approach to health emergencies. We hope cost reduction in the healthcare system and therefore for the patients as well. And well, this is just a quote, but to truly harness the power of health data, it needs to be to be safely stored, shared, and used effectively. And this is what we hope the EHDS will do. And a few slides on how we can ensure that EHDS delivers for patients. So first of all, we need to ensure, we need to address the issue of insufficient digital literacy. We know that around 55% of the population has at least basic digital skills, which however leaves so many others who are not indeed able to do so. And so even if EHDS gives us this improved access to the health data, if we don't have enough literacy, we might find it very challenging to navigate electronic health records, understand any of the information, but especially exercise any of the rights that I showed before that are also linked to control. The next point would be so not only promoting the literacy, but also ensuring that we have access to the tools. So first of all, access, but then also these access have to be ensured for people with disabilities and older people, but also with different issues who just simply might not be able to use just a general electronic health record. So it really has to be user-centric and therefore developed together with the patients. Another point is about empowering and explaining some of the rights and that we will have with the EHDS. And I mentioned only one here, but I think it's very important for the secondary use, so the opt-out mechanism. And we really need to be able to explain, of course, how you can do it, but also if there are any benefits and if there are any disadvantages when you exercise this right. So for example, you're not helping the research, but on the other hand, there are also some benefits for you if you do not trust the system. So we really need to be very transparent on how this works, but also make it quite accessible and understandable for everyone. And the last point on this is to engage the patient community and in general stakeholders such as healthcare professionals through different stages of implementation of the EHDS, and we need public consultation, surveys, forum, in order to make sure that policymakers understand what is the real impact on the EHDS, because it might be that it's not the impact that we hoped, or it's even worse, for example, a burden for some patients or not being able to access the electronic health records. So we really need to see how this is actually going to work and then adjust. I don't know how much time I have, but maybe I'll just skip quickly. Doesn't work very well. So what we have done before the implementation of the EHDS, we have engaged quite a lot with co-legislators and stakeholders. During the implementation now, a very important point, we're trying to offer trainings, and we are creating now educational material on EHDS. We have already some on consent, on data sharing, on electronic health records, but we really need a new one that's only focused on the EHDS. And on that point, we are creating at the moment a European Health Data Space Toolkit. This is going to be in lay language, free of charge, also translated in several EU languages, and it will be adaptable to national regional contexts. And this is because we really need to ensure that this thing does not really just remain in the usual EU bubble, but we really need to try to make sure that it reaches the patients, the hospitals, the healthcare professionals, and indeed we are cooperating with the Standing Committee of the European Doctors to make sure that we do something together, one for the patients, one for the doctors, and then one together that they can use also to present this initiative to the patients. And expandable, because we hope that also, for example, the member states, we hope that the ministries, they will also use it and maybe adapt it and expand on it. So instead of just seeing in it access to the electronic health record, you will have the name of the electronic health record so that it's easier, or maybe even the link to it. And also because many things are left to the member states, with the EHDS regulation, they could add, if there are any specific rights that they would add. So we are working on this. We hope to have it published in January next year. So thank you very much.